Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a pretty profound spiritual mystery. What does it actually mean to be a perfect human? And we're going to find the answers not in some dry textbook, but hidden away in the beautiful, symbolic language of the 13th century poet Rumi.
So to really get Rumi, you have to ask yourself, why stories? Why not just lay it all out in a straightforward lecture? Well, while all his peers were writing these dense philosophical texts, Rumi, he took a completely different path. He didn't want to just define spiritual perfection. He wanted you to feel it, to experience it through metaphor and story.
You see, you've got these two very different approaches, right? On one side, you have these brilliant minds like the great master Ibn Arabi, who created these incredibly detailed systematic frameworks. But Rumi, he was on a totally different wavelength. He was teaching through symbols that he wove into his stories. He wasn't building some abstract theory. He was trying to paint a picture of a living, breathing truth. So what's the central idea that he keeps exploring? It's called İnsan-ı, and this basically means the perfect or the complete human. Now, it's not about being flawless, never making a mistake. It's about reaching this state of wholeness, where a person fully reflects the divine qualities that they were created with in the first place. And you have to understand this idea of the perfect man doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It's a huge part of this much bigger worldview called Vahdet-i, or the unity of existence. This is the core belief that everything in creation, it's all just a reflection of one single underlying reality. And the perfect man, well, he's the clearest, most polished mirror reflecting that reality. So how does Rumi even begin to explain an ideal this big? Not with a definition, that's for sure. He starts his absolute masterpiece, the Mathnawi, with a sound, this haunting, almost mournful cry of a reed flute, which is known as the ney. This very first line, wow, it's basically the key that unlocks his entire way of thinking. That sound from the ney, it isn't just music. For Rumi, it's the sound of the soul itself, crying out with this deep, primal longing to go back to its spiritual home, back to its origin. And the journey of the reed itself is just this brilliant metaphor for the whole spiritual path. Think about it. First comes separation. The reed is literally cut from its home, the reed bed. That symbolizes the soul's separation from its divine source. Then comes purification. It has to be hollowed out, completely emptied of its inner self. This is all about the hard work of overcoming the ego. And only then, once it's truly empty, can it become a perfect vessel for the divine breath, ready to channel it into beautiful music. So, here's the crucial point. The perfect man isn't perfect because of his own power or his own amazing knowledge. He's perfect because he has become a perfect conduit. He's so completely emptied himself of his own ego that the divine truth can just flow right through him without any obstruction, kind of like breath flowing through that hollow reed. Okay, so from this really powerful image of emptiness, Rumi shifts gears. He moves on to another method, simple animal fables. And he uses them to draw this really sharp contrast between the massive awareness of the perfect man and the tiny, narrow view of an ordinary, ego-driven person. And what he does with these pairings is just genius. He uses them to show us crystal clear how our own ego completely blinds us. In one story, you have a parrot that judges a holy man based on its own silly standards. In another, a tiny little mouse is holding a camel's lead rope and just swelling with pride, totally clueless about the gentle giant's true power. That parrot's mistake, it's a really profound warning for all of us. We so often try to understand people who have deep spiritual insight using our own limited worldly logic. Rumi says this is like two different kinds of bees visiting the exact same flower. One ends up producing honey, while the other produces a sting. The source is the same, but it's their inner nature that determines the outcome. And then, in the story of the camel, we see this other key quality emerge. When they get to a river that's basically a puddle for the camel, but a raging ocean for the mouse, the camel doesn't mock the mouse's arrogance. Nope, it shows mercy. It just places the mouse on its hump and carries it to safety. You see, the perfect man is a guide who helps others get across the dangerous waters of life. So this quality of mercy, of clear-sighted guidance, it brings us to what is maybe Rumi's most powerful and direct symbol for the perfect man, the perfect mirror. I mean, just stop and think about what makes a mirror work. Its entire job, its whole purpose depends on it being selfless. A mirror has no image of its own, right? It has no color.
If it insisted on showing its own bluish tint, it would be a terrible mirror. Its perfection is in its absolute emptiness and its clarity.
And that is exactly what Rumi is saying about the perfect man. He has polished the mirror of his heart, scrubbing away all the rust and dust of his ego, his desires, his identity. And because he has effaced himself, he becomes this pure, unblemished surface that perfectly reflects the divine attributes, qualities like mercy and wisdom and compassion, for all of us to see.
So what happens when we pull all these symbols together? The hollow reed, the merciful camel, the polished mirror. What kind of portrait of the perfect man do they actually paint?
Well, instead of some dry, academic list of traits, what we get is a living, breathing portrait. This is a person who isn't defined by what they have, but by what they have let go of. They have deep self-knowledge, a profound humility, and limitless mercy. And they serve as this clear-eyed guide for other people precisely because they're detached from all those worldly ambitions.
And all of this leaves us with a pretty challenging question, doesn't it? In a world that is all about self-promotion, about building your personal brand and having the loudest voice in the room, what can we possibly learn from an ideal where the whole goal is to become an empty reed, a silent mirror, and a humble guide?